Hello, and welcome to Tuesday Talks with Mom. I'm Tera Myers, and I am so glad you're here. As part of Moms on a Mission, we're empowering moms across the country to stand up and advocate for their children's educational freedom. As a mom of an adult son with Down syndrome, I've walked this road, navigating the school system and fighting for the right to choose the best education for my child. And now I'm here to share that journey with you. Every 2 weeks, we'll sit down with different moms from around the country and provide thoughtful advice and share our experiences. Together, we're building a community of moms who are finding their voices, taking action, and making a difference. Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Mom. Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for another Talk with Mom. This evening, I'm so excited to bring on a really good friend of mine and an unbelievable advocate, Ginny Gentles. She's the Director of Education, Freedom, and Parental Rights at Defense of Freedom Institute. She's the host of the Freedom to Learn podcast, and I most recently shared last week her conversation with the new Secretary of Education. If you didn't see that, go back onto the Moms page and take a look at it. But I am so excited to introduce you to Ginny Gentles. Hi, Jenny.
Hey, Tara. I love that intro. This is great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I remember 2017, I think it was, walking down the sidewalk in DC and actually getting to meet you face to face and discussing probably the role most near and dear to our hearts, and that is that of mom. And sharing some stories about our children. And I just really found it to just be a kindred spirit, so to speak. So thank you. I appreciate you being here tonight.
I'm happy to be here. I apologize for being in my car. I am in a parking lot waiting for my daughter who's attending a class right now. So forgive the scenery behind me.
I think every mom can relate to that. As a mom, I think we've spent more time being the unpaid Uber driver than probably anything else.
A lot of that.
I love it. Well, that's wonderful. And I thank you for taking the time to, join us in the midst of your momhood. So I appreciate that. I know your new role that you're in is one that is very fascinating and gives you the opportunity to interact with all things current. And one of the questions as we were getting started tonight was that of the ECCA, or the Educational Choice for Children Act. And one of the questions that I got is, what is that and who qualifies for it? So would you mind just leading in with that?
Okay, we can jump right into federal policy, and that is kind of my thing. I live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., inside the Beltway, and I think kind of by default, I end up doing a lot of federal policy stuff. So this is the big thing that's being talked about when it comes to education freedom and possibilities at the federal level.
Right.
And I talked to John Schilling, who is frequently on the Hill speaking to members of Congress about this. And he's like, it's okay to mess up the name. Everybody messes up the name. So you're smart, Tara, to say ECCA. It's harder to mess up that than the full name, which is the Educational Choice for Children Act. And ECCA last Congress was wildly popular, historically popular, and received over 150 co-sponsors in the House, over 30 in the Senate. It's been reintroduced in this Congress, already has 32 co-sponsors in the Senate, which is more than last Congress. Not sure what the House numbers are, but great advocates for school choice behind it, with Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, co-sponsoring it with Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, and then over in the House, it's Congressman Burgess Owens from Utah and Congressman Adrian Smith from Nebraska. So a lot of great advocates for school choice who are like, well, it's time to do something at the federal level, but you know what we don't want to do? We don't want to create a new federal program, and we certainly don't want to house it at the Department of Education. And they were saying that before there was all this talk of doing away with the Department of Education. So this is a federal tax credit proposal that would allow corporations and individuals to donate to scholarship granting organizations out in the states and receive a non-refundable federal tax credit for that donation. And then the scholarship granting organization would operate like they already do in the states that have tax credit scholarship programs and award scholarships to qualified families. And the scholarships could be for private school tuition, they could be for tutoring, for services for special needs students, a wide variety of services. So it's not just for private school tuition, but it's for educational services as well.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, does anybody and everybody eligible for it, or is it just, I mean, how are they going to determine
Yeah,
eligibility?
they set eligibility at something like 300% of the, I want to say like median income as set by the Housing and Urban Development uh, Department at the federal level. So an easier way to put it is that 85 to 90% of Americans would be eligible for this. So this is not a universal program, and we are seeing a lot of those universal programs at the state level, but it's approaching that with the eligibility.
Wow, that's great. And what about, as I was talking to people about it and, the flu of questions that come in, what about states that don't have school choice options at this point? How is that going to affect them?
That's what's exciting about this proposal because, the folks in California, in New York, and unfortunately now in Illinois, because they got rid of their program, they don't have a lot of hope right now. They might be looking at states like yours, like Ohio, Arizona, Florida, where I'm from, and think we'll never be there. Our state legislators, our leaders are not listening to us. The unions are too powerful. So a tax credit like this allows a scholarship granting organization to serve families in those states. So eligible families would be able to apply to the scholarship granting organization to receive these scholarships for tuition and other services. And so this could be a nationwide education freedom option for families and provide opportunities for, I think they say, up to 2 million students if the $10 billion tax credit is passed.
That is amazing.
And that's 10 billion over a period of years.
Right. What about if you already have, like in Ohio, like you mentioned, in Florida, you already have scholarship opportunities. Can you use this in addition to? Will it supersede? How will that work? Because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, that's great. I'm not going to be eligible. Or tell me what that looks like. Or
Yes,
what this proposal.
they can be combined. So if you're talking about a state that might have an education freedom program, but it doesn't cover the full cost of tuition, or if you have a child with special needs and the state program does not increase the amount that is awarded based on that child's level of need, the family would be able to combine the state program and this benefit from the federal tax credit program in order to receive more funding for their child's needs. So it benefits both families in the states that don't have programs, state level programs yet, and then it also benefits families in programs that already have them.
That's amazing to me. I find that to be the most interesting piece about it is that it is not another program, that it is a tax credit opportunity for those that are looking for a way to direct their tax dollars. And also for individuals that don't have options, to be able to combine that perhaps with others. I know when we took in Ohio, when I finally said, all right, I'm going to try this isn't just a gimmick that Ohio's running. I could actually have access to the student dollars that are allocated for my children or close to it. But there was a significant amount left over that I still had to fund, and I was staying home with Sam. And so I didn't have that extra several $1,000s per daughter to go towards the private school tuition. So something like this would have been phenomenal at that time to be able to stack on top to help me out a little bit as I was trying to juggle all of those issues, so I'm sure that this can help out a lot of families.
Yeah, and it really is going to be up to the corporations and the individuals to donate. It's not that the money magically materializes.
Right.
Individuals and corporations will need to donate to these scholarship granting organizations in order to receive the tax credit, and then the scholarship granting organizations will have access to funds to pass them along. So we do hope if donors are listening that they could get ready to make generous donations, and that corporations will be open-minded about this opportunity and look at it as a way to ensure that families have access to options that they so desperately need. And in an era where we have schools that are just failing to educate our students in too many places. So we do hope that donors will take advantage of this when it passes, which it hasn't yet. We
Right.
just hope that it will, as part of what's called a reconciliation process. This was a big measure, budget measure, that's and tax measure that's being put together in Washington, and we feel that it's really important that ECCA, Educational Choice for Children Act, is something that's considered and included in that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think that we need to now what if, somebody's listening and they're thinking, well, how can I help make this, what can I do to help ensure that this passes? What is something that I can do? I'm sitting here at home and I'm hearing this about this opportunity. It's a potential. I'm thinking back to the day when I was at home and I was told by my district, you can't do it without us. Go ahead. And it was such a stark statement. My husband was just looked at them like, you have no idea what you're doing. And they said, you go ahead, take your children somewhere else because you can't do it without us. We control all the funds. And I remember thinking, oh yeah. And then I went home and I'm like, yeah, they do. But I was able to sift through that. And so I'm thinking, what about the mom that's sitting at home right now thinking, I need to get my hands on that. What can I do? How can I help in the effort?
It's funny that you asked that, Tara, because I interviewed Tommy Schultz, the head of American Federation for Children, on my podcast, and I asked just that question, and he's like, "Well, there's the old statement, call your congressman," which it applies here. Call your congressman. You know that they're getting lobbied by unions. You
Yeah.
know that they're getting lobbied by the educational establishment that says, we want the status quo. We have to defend the status quo. We have to maintain our control and our power. And they aren't hearing from parents as much as they should. Parents saying, my child was not taught to read. My child's special needs were not addressed, even though I went to every IEP meeting as prepared as possible. My child is falling through the cracks. We need an alternative option, and we want this Educational Choice for Children Act. So definitely call your congressman. That's really important. And I mean, both the member of the House of Representatives and also your two senators. They really do need to hear from their constituents.
I think that's great. I've been trying. There was something that was coming through, and we were on our way to church a couple weeks ago, and I am almost embarrassed to confess this, but I just picked up the phone while we were driving to church, and my husband's looking at me. We were in the middle of talking, and I said, "Well, I just got this call to action," and I literally picked up my phone, and I made 3 calls: my rep and my two
So
senators.
you, Tara.
I know, and I rattled off some, request, and I hung up the phone, and he's like, that took you 30 seconds and you made 3 phone calls in 30 seconds. And I said, I did that to show you that if everybody did that, took 30 seconds, it doesn't take long to leave a message. Now granted, it was on a Sunday, so I didn't anticipate that there would be anyone there, but I know that they listened to the voice messages. And I said, look at that. They now know what I think about this. And it's important that we do that. So I appreciate you sharing that once again, because I keep telling everyone that I come in contact with, we hire these individuals, we bring them into play. It's really important that they hear from us. It's like you wouldn't hire another staff and not check in on them every now and again and see how things are going. And that's really what
Okay.
we're doing.
But for the introverts out there, so there's the
Okay.
extroverts, they're the Teras, and then there's the introverts, they're the Ginnies. Like, I'm pretty sure the AFC and other organizations have set up portals where you can also write to
Yeah.
your member of Congress. So for those of us who don't like to pick up the phone, it is intimidating. Yes, it might only take 30 seconds, but know that, just sending them a note through one of these portals is effective as well.
Yes, I agree. And believe it or not, on my personality test, I really am an introvert extrovert. So
No, I believe it, Tara.
let's not, you don't believe it? It's
No,
true.
I do. I get it. I think for both of us, people see us like when we're on and
Right.
we're, like in our like we've got business
Yes.
to tend to, and we want action from the people we're interacting with, so we're on. But I get it. We both need our
Our little
downtime
quarter.
too.
Yes, our corner of the room. No, all of that is really good because it's essential for people to have multiple options in order to be able to get things done and to not feel like they're sitting and waiting for something to happen that maybe they don't have any control over. And we do all have just a tiny bit of control. We just have to figure out what our space of comfort level is with that. So thank you. That's really good. As far as uh, any other programs or any other, oh, again, not programs, but options that are out there. I know it's so easy to call it a program, but your interview, I watched your interview on your podcast with the Secretary of Education. I loved it. I loved it. It was short. It was really detailed, and I loved that. But we were talking about some of the questions that you asked the secretary on and off the camera in regards to individuals with special needs. You know, that is where most of my area is because of Sam. I also, you know, fought really hard for my daughters. But, you know, Sam seems to be the population that oftentimes is used for multiple purposes. One, they're oftentimes left behind or not serviced well. And two, those that are in opposition of providing options and resources to students love to use kids like Sam as Sam's going to lose all of his rights. He's going to lose all of his access to options. This is going to be, you know, the sky is falling. Can you answer to some of that, or just share with me your thoughts or some of your experience that you've experienced lately of what's going on in regards to the department and ECCA? Go ahead.
It's something I'm noticing in Washington, and I'm sure you're noticing it in the news as well. Whenever anyone opposed to anything happening to the status quo, to any bureaucrat in the Department of Education, to anything that exists as it currently and always has in their minds, they immediately bring up, as you said, students with disabilities, and immediately say that if you do anything, it must be cutting funding for IDEA, for students with disabilities. And so that's disingenuous and extremely misleading, and I think cruel, because you're scaring families, vulnerable families, exhausted families, you and I know, exhausted families, into thinking that just something that's happening to bureaucrats at the Department of Education has anything to do with the appropriations level, the funding level that Congress sets for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. That's not true. IDEA funding is set by Congress. There's annual appropriations bills, annual continuing resolutions that keep those funding flowing. And changes that are happening right now to the bureaucratic makeup, to the way offices are being arranged, to the staffing levels at the Department of Education have nothing to do with the appropriations level for IDEA. So I just want to say, like, right there, just if somebody's bringing up students with disabilities, all of a sudden, you know, since when did they care so much in the past, right? Like, if they're bringing them up as soon as the Department of Education's mentioned, they're probably being very, very disingenuous. And so don't trust every word that they say. Question, probe, and doubt what they're saying. So I think that's a big thing, that conflation of appropriations, funding level, and anything happening at the department. But I also wanted to say that I did talk to the secretary, but I actually talked to her and her team regularly. I was part of the transition process, and continuing to interact with the senior leadership at the department. They know that the federal government has an obligation to protect students with disabilities. They know that IDEA predates the U.S. Department of Education. The original law had a different name, but it was passed in 1975, 5 years before the Department of Education was opened. So they know that this law is in place, that it has been in place. They know, and I went to a briefing during the transition where department staff were getting ready for the 50th anniversary celebration that will happen November 29th this year. So this law's been around for 50 years. It's not going away. Congress is not doing anything to reauthorize it. Congress is not touching the funding. It's about 14 or so billion right now a year. What might happen is that it might, responsibility for it might shift from one federal building to another, but that does not impact the flow of funding. The Secretary of Education's made that very clear that the funding will continue. The president, I attended an event at the White House last week. The president made it clear services will not be interrupted. Funding will not be interrupted. So they're making every reassurance that they are prioritizing the needs of the students with disabilities, and that funding is going to continue to flow and nothing's going to happen to IDEA.
That's excellent. And, you know, like we talked earlier, it's very important for parents to remember, keep doing what you're doing at the state and local level. That is where things happen. And if they're trying to start blaming the federal government, nothing that's happening at the federal level is affecting what happens as far as funding and services for children with disabilities. So we need to hold them accountable. And, you know, I have firsthand experience of that when I was struggling with Samuel all the way back in 2004. And I thought, well, here we go. I'm going to go to the source of the bill. And I called the United States Department of Education. I spent many, you know, through the whole channels and everything. And they told me, you are the gatekeeper of IDEA at the local level for your son. We do not hold that. We provide funding and oversight. We are not the ones that actually hold them. That's up to you and the local level. So let's remember that, parents. It's us, you know, to hold that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say two things on that. I think that we can assume that schools and districts are going to use what's happening at the federal level as an excuse. And so, Tara, you're so right. And I know that you talk to a lot of moms individually to send this message. No, don't let them use anything that's happening in Washington as an excuse. Like, they're not being truthful if they're using anything that's happening in Washington as an excuse. The funding is continuing to flow and the rights continue to exist just like they have for 50 years.
Right.
And then the second thing is that the Office of Civil Rights, which currently exists at the Department of Education, there's talk of, you know, maybe it will be consolidated with the civil rights protections that happen at the Department of Justice, but they will continue to exist. So when the rights are being violated, there is the option to file a federal civil rights complaint. It's not the fastest option, though.
Right, right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you clearing that up and goodness, answering all of these questions. I mean, this is great. I think you gave a great overview. Is there anything else that you want to add that maybe we didn't cover, or you just, you know, have anything that you want to add in regards to ECCA or what's happening before we let you get going? Is there anything else that you've
Well,
got?
I'd say, you know, the governors have been in Washington a fair bit, and it's helpful when they're here, when they're writing op-eds, when they're talking in the media, for them to talk about what they're doing with education, how they're leading, how they're prioritizing school choice and prioritizing making funding more student-centered in multiple ways, how they might use more flexible federal funding to support school choice. So for listeners who regularly interact with your state leaders, like, encourage them to keep doing that. I think it keeps the policy discussion lively and interesting, and helps the folks here in Washington realize, like, there's good stuff happening at the state level and we should
Yeah.
enable that.
I love it. That's a great, great suggestion for people. Ginny, I'm so thankful that we were able to glean some insight from you and some information. It's always a pleasure to get to interact with you and steal some of your time because I know you're extremely busy. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well,
I really appreciate it.
thank you, Tara. You are you set the bar high for being a parent advocate, and I've just been so grateful for our friendship and for the opportunity to learn from you every time we talk. So I appreciate this time together this evening.
Well, thank you. So do I. Thank you so much. Well, thanks. Thank your daughter for giving you to us for just a short while. I appreciate that. And we'll be talking soon. And, you know, if you don't mind, if you're willing, I'd love to have you back in a couple months to see how things are going and touch base on this. I know our listeners will love to hear from you. This was really good stuff. So thank you, Jenny.
Happy to provide an update, hopefully from a home rather than a car next time.
I love it. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Oh, thank you, everyone who decided to come on tonight and listen to us share a little bit about ECCA and federal law that, or actual federal proposals is what it is. Jenny's just a great resource. She's working hard behind the scenes and in DC. And so I really am looking forward to bringing her back on future episodes of Tuesday Talks with Mom to just share some insight and answer questions. So if you or anyone you know has questions or concerns or something pops up later, feel free to either contact me at teramyerschoolchoice.com or any of the links that you saw posted on the screen to get a hold of Jenny. That would be great. And follow us on Facebook for more updates, and we will roll those out as they come available to us. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great night.